Hey, welcome. Hey, how's it going? What's up? What's up? What's up? So I'm back. How's it going? How's everybody? Are we doing okay? Welcome to Rush to Judgment with Jessica, and I'm Jessica. How we doing? It's just been so long. It really has. I know, I know. I you know, the last video I said, I let you know I died there for a little bit and, my audio sucked there for a second and I had a different setup for a quick little minute. And then, yeah, that lasted for a whole um, one episode. And now I have a new setup and I have been doing that. So, yeah. So that's what I've been doing. But if you're new here, you don't know any of that. So, long story short, I'm very indecisive and I move things around a lot and I can't get comfortable and my anxiety goes through the roof and I can't figure out what to do with my life. And so, this is what I do. I move and reorganize and yeah. So, but hopefully, I made an office. I moved everything out of this room and made this my office. So I should not have um since I do work from home a lot and I needed a space. I needed a space. That was my space. Literally my space. Because my room has gotten taken over by a little minion and um you know what have you. So I have literally put myself in a closet. So it's a big closet and it now doubles as an office and a studio. So there. um so yeah, I like it. It's nice. And my room is now my room and it does not double as an office or a studio. It is strictly my room and that's it. So that's cool. I'm good with that. And plus, now having two dogs, it was getting a bit much in there. Two dogs, a kid and another kid and it was just getting to be too much and too hectic in one room. While it being a big room and all, it was still getting to be a bit much in one room. So, that being said, welcome. Welcome to Rush to Judgment with Jessica. And I'm Jessica. And we here talk about a little bit of everything. We talk about, we go over some trials and we go over some true crime stories. We talk about some mainly true crime right now. We've gone over some twisted cases and true crime and how many times can I say true crime in one description of what we do here? I don't know. Let's keep going and find out. But so yeah, that's kind of what we do here. It's so far that's what we've been doing. I've kind of been kicking around a couple ideas while I've been moving things around. Um just on some different ideas of what I like to do. I mean, I do like to watch a lot of true crime things, but I also like to watch a lot of documentaries, and I like to watch a lot of. Um, Mainly, my things are, just watching TV or documentaries or um, a lot of things that are based on real life, but not always. A lot of it can be supernatural too. I like the supernatural. I like I like a lot of kind of a range of things, but kind of more on the spooky side. Um, so I've kind of just been throwing around some ideas. Haven't quite narrowed anything down. I was thinking about doing some TV show reviews and some movie reviews, and maybe doing some commentary on some stuff like that. Um, just kind of some little fun stuff. Just maybe some shorter little videos and bits like that. Um, but yeah, still doing some trials and things like that for sure. Because there are some interesting trials coming up within the next few months, that I do want to focus on and talk about. The Sarah Boone trial, I think, is set for um, next month or later this month, um, as well as I think there's a hearing for Courtney Clenny. And yeah, and I'm not 100% sure if I want to get started with the Idaho murder issue, because I mean, there's still, sorry, they're still really in the early phases of it. And I've just kind of been following along with um, the other people that are the other people that are following along with it at this point. Um, and they're not, there's a hearing for the guy that they arrested for it. There's a hearing for him on Thursday, I believe. A status hearing for him. But really, at this point, it's just a bunch of legal stuff. And like I've said before, I don't know enough about like the initial legal stuff to really do all of that. Like when stuff goes to trial, I can, kind of purse through some things and get an idea of what's going on. But like a lot of legal jargon and stuff like that, I don't know a whole lot about. So I don't know. So I would rather, keep the preliminary stuff to them to do and just kind of follow along. And eventually it'll go to, if it goes to trial, follow it there. But yeah, sorry, I'm just tired. I sat down and I just got tired all of a sudden. But anywho, um, so with that being said, also just reminder that like I said, I'm not an expert in any of this stuff. So it's just to let you know that a lot of this stuff is just for commentary and it's not for any type of education purposes. Maybe you'll learn something, maybe you won't. I don't know. Sometimes I can learn you some things, and sometimes I can't. Sometimes I don't know all of the answers. Um, most of the time, I do not know all of the answers. And most of the time, I end up with more questions than what I started with. So, with that being said, we are watching another episode with the crazy true crime stories. And then I have to find other things to do. Now, I got some other true crime stuff to get going with, and I need to find a trial. that I want to watch. And we shall get going. I really need to sit down and actually focus because I have not been putting nothing out here. I know I was like banging them out like video after video after video, sometimes 2, 3 a day. And then I just kind of stopped. Yeah, YouTube didn't like that. It just kind of, I kind of just fell off. Well, holidays and then, the other thing. And then, it all just kind of happened and I just died for a minute. And then I almost died today for real. Like I fell, the dogs, I was letting the dogs out and they ran in front of me down the stairs and clipped my foot and I fell and I fell down some stairs, y'all. I fell down some stairs and it hurt. It was a lot of weight that fell down the stairs. I went boom, boom, boom down some stairs. It wasn't fun. It hurt. And I was here all alone. I could have died. It's traumatic. But I survived. And now I'm just sore. No, my whole left side here is sore. I'm going to wake up in the morning and be like, what happened? Oh, right. I fell on my ass. But anyway. Okay. So let us get to what we were doing today. And that is to do that. But take it away. Because I want to get it up and going first. And then we can add it. Hopefully my audio doesn't sound like complete shit. Oh, hold on. Let me turn off my fan. Because you probably hear that in the background. Hold on. Because not only did the last time did my audio sound like shit, but I had the fan going and I didn't even really for real realize that I had it going until after. And then I did the video and I was like, you know what? Fuck it. I don't even care. Just put it out there. And they got the gist of it. They at least watched the video and they'll know that I tried. I did my best. I tried. I'm sorry. That was really shitty. That was a shitty video and I probably shouldn't have put it out there, but I did. So there you go. But I tried. Okay, we go.
Fire Rescue Cyrus, what is the address? All right, listen, we're going to get help on the way, okay? All right, how old is the person you're calling for? Okay. All right, listen, rescue's going to be on the way, okay?
It started out as a typical Tuesday morning for Alexandra Tobias and her infant son Dylan. But in the blink of an eye, her entire world was flipped upside down as she found herself in the middle of every parent's worst nightmare.
All right, listen, we're going to get help on the way, okay?
Shortly after making that bone-chilling call, Alexandra explained to authorities that her child had been knocked off the couch by a dog and hit his head. However, investigators quickly realized that the truth was far more sinister. As you heard, Alexandra is crying and appears breathless at times. These are common symptoms of emotional shock and appear to be genuine. Alexandra made that heart-stopping call on January 9th, 2010, from her home in Jacksonville, Florida, where she lived with Dylan and his father, E.J. Edmondson.
All right, I'm going to tell you how to get to mouth.
Okay.
With the baby's head slightly tilted back, completely cover the baby's mouth and nose with your mouth.
With my mouth, okay.
Yes, blow 2 puffs of air into the lungs. You want to pump the chest hard and fast 30 times.
30 times. Okay. I want to hurt. 2, 3, 4.
Following the 911 dispatcher's advice, she desperately attempted mouth-to-mouth resuscitation and chest compressions until paramedics arrived. Dylan remained unresponsive and was then rushed to a nearby hospital in critical condition. Doctors worked tirelessly and did everything in their power to save his life, but unfortunately, it wasn't enough. After hours of frequent interventions, with Dylan exhibiting disorganized breathing, he passed away the following morning. Alexandra was visibly devastated. Those close said she was a fiercely protective mother who always went out of her way to ensure that Dylan was safe and comfortable. While family and friends described her as fun-loving and mischievous, investigators soon realized that Alexandra had been struggling with her fair share of inner demons for a long time. She claimed she had an incredibly tough childhood, allegedly filled with abuse and neglect, mostly at the hands of her mother, who was severely bipolar and attempted to take her own life several times. Her treatment as a child likely had a major impact on her development into an adult. When a child suffers from abuse or neglect, it's very common for them to later repeat that behavior. Unfortunately, the generational cycle of abuse and neglect can be very difficult to break. Tragically, at age 16, Alexandra made a heartbreaking discovery. She came home to find her mother deceased in a living room chair from an apparent heart condition. "It shattered me," Alexandra later recalled. "It broke me. I've never coped with it." 2 years later, Alexandra met EJ, who she referred to as a bad boy. The couple eventually moved in together, and while Alexandra had plans to attend college, she put everything on hold when she got pregnant. During this time, Alexandra later stated that she was thrilled but scared more than anything. As it turns out, Alexandra and EJ's relationship was very tumultuous. In fact, they'd both been arrested for a domestic conflict just a couple of weeks before Dylan was killed. Alexandra was placed on probation in order to attend anger management classes. Detectives were horrified to realize that because Dylan was home during the incident, the Department of Children and Families was supposed to be monitoring the situation. But unfortunately, they claimed to have received an incomplete report. A forensic psychologist commented on Alexandra's mental state, speculating that she suffered postpartum depression following Dylan's birth. Furthermore, the forensic psychologist stated, she took it as a personal failure whenever the baby was sick or crying. When her boyfriend would come home, the baby would cry. So she began to connect his presence with the baby being unhappy. She would reportedly take him to the doctor without hesitation for any illnesses or injuries, no matter how minor. She even joined a Facebook group dedicated to spreading awareness of shaken baby syndrome. However, doctors were immediately suspicious of Alexandra's story, as Dylan's injuries weren't consistent with an accidental fall from the couch. In addition to a badly broken femur bone, he showed various head injuries, including bruising on the skull and bleeding in the brain. Doctors said that the damage to his brain was so severe that he could not breathe independently and had been put on a ventilator before he died. Investigators and members of a child protective team were called to the hospital to question the grieving mother. But before they could even introduce themselves, Alexandra said she had lied earlier because she feared for the well-being of her dog after it supposedly knocked the baby over, and that she wanted to come clean about what really happened to Dylan. Now get ready, because this is where the story takes a turn that no one saw coming. But please bear in mind that the following details are very disturbing, and your discretion is strongly advised. Throughout the interview, Alexandra's story changed several times, but she maintained that Dylan had been vomiting regularly for about 4 days, and it seemed odd that she hadn't already taken him to the doctor. According to Dylan's father, EJ, he said they'd both been concerned about Dylan's frequent vomiting because he'd previously undergone surgery for intestinal problems. However, Alexandra claimed that he seemed perfectly normal on the morning in question and had slept fine all night on his back with both arms over his head, the way he likes it. Alexandra changing her story multiple times is a big red flag that not only is she being dishonest, but she likely still hasn't told the truth. Alexandra went on to tell the police that when she went to change his diaper, Dylan's head accidentally hit the side of the changing table. She said he began vomiting but eventually settled down, so she laid him down rather rough in his pack-and-play to smoke a cigarette. Afterward, she said she came back inside and put Dylan on the couch to feed him, but he threw up the food and got fussy. So Alexandra left him on the couch to smoke another cigarette, but she was interrupted by Dylan's cries, and when she went inside to check, he was on the floor. That's when she supposedly realized he was no longer breathing and dialed 911. Alexandra assumed her dog had knocked him off the couch and broken his leg, but she wasn't sure why he was gasping for air or what had caused him to stop breathing twice. Apparently, Dylan gasped for air after Alexandra initially noticed he wasn't breathing and then completely stopped again. What she was certain of, though, was that the dog had likely caused her son's injuries. While Alexandra was apparently described by others as a caring mother who always made sure Dylan was safe and comfortable, her self-described behavior does not at all fit this description. Caring for a baby can be extremely stressful, and it's important to step away for a break when you need it. However, you should always make sure you leave the baby in a safe location, such as their crib or a pack-and-play. When she was finished giving her account, the investigative team shocked Alexandra with evidence that proved something far more sinister had been going on. They told her that her story just didn't make sense because some of Dylan's injuries were new and recent, but others were actually old and had occurred before this incident. When asked how that could be possible, Alexandra replied simply that she'd accidentally bumped his head in the past when he was 5 to 7 weeks old. Alexandra suddenly started divulging that she may have hit his head harder on the changing table than previously stated. She also admitted that Dylan could have been placed in the pack-and-play more roughly than she thought. Detectives spoke with the doctors, who indicated that Dylan's injuries were consistent with abusive head trauma. So they asked Alexandra if she would come down to the station for a formal interview. She agreed, initially telling the same story as earlier about Dylan hitting his head on the changing table and saying that she did not lay him down easy in the pack-and-play. But then, an even more horrible truth began to emerge. Alexandra must have realized that no one was buying her story, so she finally started telling the actual truth. On that morning, she said Dylan was still struggling to hold down food, as he'd been for several days. Then she claimed to have taken an anti-anxiety drug before logging onto Facebook to play Fishville, an interactive simulation game. Although many news outlets reported that she was playing Farmville, police documents reveal it was actually the game Fishville. However, while she was immersed in the virtual reality, Dylan began crying, and after some time, Alexandra snapped. She told investigators that she picked him up and shook him roughly, possibly hitting his head on the computer in a fit of rage. She even demonstrated using a toy doll how she aggressively shook the infant. What Alexandra described is shaken baby syndrome. It's a form of child abuse where a caregiver shakes a young child, usually under the age of 2, out of anger or frustration. The shaking often causes a brain injury with varying degrees of severity, including death. Afterward, Alexandra allegedly stepped away to smoke a cigarette to calm down, leaving Dylan on the sofa. That's when she speculated her dog knocked him onto the floor, causing him to start crying. Alexandra then admitted to picking him up and violently shaking him again, only this time he stopped breathing. Finally, she briefly called the baby's father before making that frantic call to 911.
Okay, listen, I'm going to give you instructions. We're going to get rescue on the way.
Often, shaken baby syndrome occurs in the heat of the moment when a parent is extremely frustrated, which may have been what happened the first time she shook Dylan. But even after taking time to calm down, she still immediately returned to shake him again. This suggests that she may have been acting deliberately in an effort to harm Dylan, rather than an impulsive act. Alexandra soon claimed to have no recollection of actually shaking Dylan, but somehow knew that was what had happened, telling detectives, "I honestly can't recall the actual incident itself, but when it comes down to it, I'd taken a good handful of some Xanax. I guess I came to and realized that something wasn't right. I didn't know what it was in my arms. I realized that something I was holding before that was moving was no longer moving." However, it's conflicting that Alexandra was able to give such a detailed account of what happened, before claiming not to recall because of the Xanax. Because this detail was added later, it's possible she's lying and attempting to use the medication as an excuse. If Alexandra had in fact taken a handful of Xanax, she may be able to raise a voluntary intoxication defense. In many cases, this defense doesn't completely absolve the defendant of liability, but instead reduces the overall culpability for the crime. Regardless, she was immediately taken into custody and charged with aggravated child abuse, later heightened to murder when Dylan passed away. Those who knew Alexandra were absolutely stunned by the news. No one ever expected her to commit such an unbelievably heinous crime against a child she appeared to love more than anything. Alexandra's friends recalled her being a fantastic mother, with one contact telling reporters, "That girl was so protective over that baby. There should be more investigation done. I just don't know if she just snapped or what." The baby's father, EJ, told investigators that he had spoken with Alexandra that morning and instructed her to call the doctor. Still, when later asked about her experience as a mother, Alexandra said, It was beautiful. I couldn't get enough of him. I didn't want people touching him. I didn't want them to break him. I didn't want nobody to do anything to him. His cries were like music. They weren't really sad to me because that's him. That's his way of communicating. However, in a tragic twist of fate, it was Dylan's cries that actually prompted the violent reaction from Alexandra, which ultimately led to his death. 10 months after her arrest, on October 27, 2010, Alexandra entered a guilty plea to 1 count of second-degree murder before a judge. This decision came after an official presentation of the evidence, including Alexandra's activity in the anti-baby shaking Facebook group and her statements to the forensic psychologist implying she had blacked out during the crime. However, prosecutors also shared a recorded phone conversation from inside the prison in which Alexandra told a relative that she had lied about blacking out. Interestingly, prisoners know that their calls, except those to an attorney, will be recorded. Those calls can then be used against them in court, such as in Alexandra's case. Despite her attempts to seek mercy from the judge, Alexandra was sentenced to 50 years in prison for killing her son. It was speculated that Alexandra had postpartum depression, and with that in mind, there are symptoms to look out for that may be a sign someone is suffering from postpartum depression. The symptoms can occur shortly after giving birth, or it may take months. Some common symptoms include anxiety or panic attacks, racing, scary thoughts, excessive irritability, anger or agitation, sadness, crying uncontrollably for very long periods of time, fear of not being a good mother, fear of being left alone with the baby, sleep difficulties,
So
disinterest in the baby,
just after
family,
a
and
baby.
friends, thoughts of hurting yourself or the baby. If you or someone you know is struggling with any of these symptoms, please reach out to a professional such as your doctor or a licensed mental health provider for help.
Ladies, having
All
a
right,
baby
I'm sure that story has you filled with
hard
rage,
on
but this
your
video is
body.
far from over, so let's get into the next twisted case. On August 19, 2020, 25-year-old Sydney Sutherland left her home in Jackson County, Arkansas to go for a run, but she never came back. The next day, her cell phone was found in a rural field a little over a mile from her home, leading her family to fear the worst.
See, that's what
But
happens
then,
when you
a grim
exercise.
discovery would prove that what happened to Sydney was more horrific than anyone could have ever imagined.
Get abducted.
Sydney had just returned from a family vacation in Florida
Murdered.
and had an extra day off from Unity Health Harris Medical Center, where she worked as a registered nurse. She lived with her boyfriend, Alex, and was known to exercise frequently. That's why nobody thought twice about her decision to go for a run on that fateful day. After a brief visit with her mother, Sydney texted Alex to let him know that she was heading out for a run. Everything seemed totally fine until Alex returned home from work later that day and realized Sydney's car and personal belongings were still at home, but she was nowhere to be found. The worried boyfriend started reaching out to her family and friends, hoping that someone had seen her, but nobody had spoken with Sydney in hours. Because this behavior was extremely out of character for Sydney, Alex called the police right away, and they quickly organized a massive search effort. As word of her disappearance spread rapidly over social media, a UPS driver came forward to say that he had seen Sydney jogging along her usual route between Newport and Grubb, Arkansas, at around 3 o'clock in the afternoon. However, as darkness fell over the search area, authorities called off the search until the following morning. But as soon as the sun came up, swarms of volunteers, as well as the Arkansas State Police and the FBI, came together to look for the missing nurse. Helicopters circled the skies above her running route, but when they found no trace of Sydney, the hope that she might have simply fallen and injured herself became less likely. Instead, investigators were starting to suspect that she had been abducted, but at this point, they weren't even sure if she'd ever made it out for her run at all. Sure, her boyfriend said she had planned to go for a run, but that didn't mean it actually happened. Not to mention, the only person who claimed to have seen her was the UPS driver, and we all know that witness statements aren't always the most reliable.
It was the UPS
Then, in what appeared to be a stroke of luck, another witness named Quake Llewellyn came forward to tell police that he had also seen Sydney that day. Quake said he hardly knew Sydney, but felt confident that he had seen her jogging along the same route. Fortunately, Sydney's phone contained an app that shared her location with her boyfriend and family, but their concerns escalated when it indicated that she was in the middle of a field. Authorities followed the digital clues and found her phone, but still no Sydney. However, they did locate a pair of damaged sunglasses a few hundred yards away from the phone that relatives confirmed belonged to Sydney. The day ended with no further clues, but investigators started questioning anyone who knew Sydney and lived in the area, beginning with the local man, Quake, who mentioned he had seen her jogging past his truck. Quake was an award-winning farmer and a well-known member of the community, so it came as no surprise that he seemed eager to help in the investigation and was among the searchers. Still, according to his statement, Quake was the last known person to see Sydney before she vanished, so they requested a search of his truck as a formality, to clear his name of any suspicion. Quake agreed to the search, but absolutely no one was prepared for what came next. The Arkansas State Police Sergeant commented that during the search of Quake's GMC Sierra pickup truck, agents located what appeared to be blood inside the cracks of the tailgate and on the tailgate. The discovery was shocking, to say the very least, but it didn't necessarily mean he had anything to do with Sydney's disappearance. After all, this guy was well-liked and part of an incredibly prominent farming family, so it seemed unfathomable that he might have done something to Sydney. Nevertheless, investigators had to follow the lead, so they also searched Quake's phone, and what they found sent a chill down their spines. According to a tracking app on his phone, Quake had been a little over 2 miles from where they discovered Sydney's phone in a deserted field roughly 1 hour after she was reported missing. Furthermore, he didn't seem to have any reasonable explanation for why he would be in that desolate area, so investigators rushed to check it out. Sadly, it didn't take long for them to stumble upon an absolute nightmare.
Oh, no.
On August 21st, just 2 days after she walked out of her home for the last time, Sydney's body was found buried just a few yards from where the app on Quake's phone suggested he had been. An autopsy later revealed that she had died from multiple blunt force injuries. Quake's mother and wife came forward to authorities right away, telling them about a surveillance video taken from their property on the day Sydney went missing that they needed to look at. While reviewing the footage, the two women pointed out the sizable dent in the hood of Quake's truck, and they insisted it hadn't been there earlier in the day. Oh, and remember how Quake told investigators that he hardly knew Sydney? Well, as it turns out, he actually knew her pretty well. Detectives were shocked to find that they'd grown up in the same community and even attended the same tight-knit high school, which reportedly had a graduating class of less than 50 students.
Whoa.
Quake and Sydney were also friends on Facebook until he recently unfriended her. So while it didn't sound like they were best friends or anything, he certainly knew her better than he initially let on. Then, just hours after Sydney's body was found, Quake broke down under the mounting pressure and made a stunning admission. The friendly farmer said that he'd been driving down the road when he passed Sydney, and for reasons unknown, he turned the truck around and accelerated directly into her as she was jogging. Sydney was still alive after the impact, but Quake didn't stop there. Instead, he dragged her into the bed of his truck and drove to the isolated field, where he confessed to assaulting and murdering her. Quake then said that he tried to forget about the whole thing, and he allegedly claimed that he hadn't hit her on purpose. However, it's possible that Quake had been fantasizing doing something similar, and when the right opportunity presented itself, he took it. It's unusual for someone to do this completely out of the blue. Even in individuals who suffer from some kind of mental health episode, there are usually some warning signs first. Finally, investigators surmised that Quake had used a shovel to dig a grave and bury Sydney's body, as they found clear shoe prints on top of and near the grave. The shoes appear to match the ones Quake was seen wearing in surveillance footage on the day of Sydney's disappearance. Quake was subsequently arrested and charged with capital murder, assault, kidnapping, and abuse of a corpse. His attorneys requested a series of psychological exams to determine whether he was fit to stand trial or not. The psychologist ultimately concluded that he did not display evidence of a mental disease or mental defect at the time of the attack. Furthermore, experts specifically noted one disturbing comment made by Quake during the evaluation, in which he stated he tried messing with Sydney's body a bit while she was still in the bed of his truck. Quake's attorneys cut him off before he could elaborate on this disturbing detail. While it's unknown if Quake had any prior history of violent behavior, given the nature of this crime, it does seem likely. He appeared to carry out this crime impulsively, which can be common with sociopaths. The fact that he pretended to help look for her, even though he knew the whole time she was dead, indicates that he lacked empathy for her family, as well as any remorse for what he did. During her victim impact statement, Sydney's mother addressed Quake directly, calling him Satan and saying, "She was not yours to take." She also told the court how he hugged her during one of the search efforts with the same hands you killed her with. Quake initially pled innocent to all charges, but eventually accepted a plea deal to avoid the death penalty. So, if you're ever looking for him, not that you would be, you can find Quake serving out a life sentence without the possibility of parole at the Randolph County Jail in Pocahontas, Arkansas. Unfortunately, there was probably nothing Sydney could have done differently to prevent this tragedy. It's unclear if Quake had been watching Sydney for some time and knew her running route, or whether the attack that day was more spontaneous. Changing up your running routes instead of sticking to a noticeable pattern could potentially make you less likely to be a target. However, one of the biggest safety tips is to enlist a friend or partner to be your running buddy.
Don't exercise.
Now, let's get to our final twisted true crime case.
I suggest that.
On September 21st, 2012, 29-year-old Jill Marr left her job at the Australian Broadcasting Corporation and went out on the town to celebrate her colleague's birthday. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary as she said her goodbyes after celebrating the birthday and began the 5-minute walk back to her flat to end the night. But that was the last time anyone would see Jill alive. Now, let's get a little backstory. Jill was born in Ireland and attended college at the University College in Dublin, where she met the love of her life, Tom Marr. The couple moved to Melbourne, Australia in 2009, and Jill accepted a job at the Australian Broadcasting Corporation. On that fateful Friday night, Jill and a few of her co-workers left the birthday party sometime around 9 p.m. to go to another bar for drinks. Most of them decided to call it a night after that, but Jill ventured to one last pub with a friend for a nightcap before heading home. Jill left the pub at around 1:30 in the morning, and while her friend offered to walk her home, Jill said it was just a short distance, and she would be fine on her own. So she began the journey back to her flat, which, just for the record, was a little under half a mile away. During the first part of her walk, Jill called her brother for a quick check-in. That was the last conversation she would ever have with anyone. According to her husband Tom, he woke up at roughly 4 a.m. and quickly realized that Jill hadn't arrived home yet. He called her phone over and over, but got no answer. Trying not to panic, Tom also reached out to her co-workers, hoping she had simply lost track of time. When it became clear that none of them could account for her whereabouts, he raced outside to search the route between their flat and the pub. Jill was nowhere to be found. Tom wasted no time and immediately contacted the local police to report his wife missing. Authorities sensed the gravity of the situation and sprang into action, as did Jill's friends and co-workers, who did everything they could to spread the word of her disappearance. Meanwhile, officers scoured the downtown area where Jill was last seen. They also collected evidence from Jill's flat and questioned Tom, who swore he had nothing to do with his wife's sudden absence. When asked why he wasn't out with Jill and her co-workers, he said he had planned to join but accidentally fell asleep on the sofa. Still, investigators couldn't help but notice the gap of unaccounted time in his story, and the doting husband quickly became their prime suspect. 2 more days passed without any sign of Jill, and her loved ones started to fear the worst. Then police made a startling discovery. They found her purse on a street near her home, but what really made their hair stand on end was that they had thoroughly searched that exact street the previous days. Furthermore, all of Jill's personal belongings, except her cell phone, were still inside, ruling out robbery as a potential motive. Detectives also believed that the bag had been planted in that location sometime after the initial searches. In light of this unsettling discovery, Tom spoke with reporters, urging anyone who might have seen something to come forward. Detectives were still very suspicious of Tom, but in carrying on with the investigation, they started requesting surveillance footage from the businesses Jill might have passed by on her walk home, and it didn't take long for them to get their first big clue. The cameras captured Jill as she walked by a bridal boutique, and she appeared to be speaking with a man wearing a distinctive blue hoodie. Jill's body language suggests that she may have been feeling uncomfortable, as she appeared to be trying to step away or keep her distance from the man in the blue hoodie. Unfortunately, the video wasn't clear enough for investigators to tell whether it was Tom or not, but they would find out soon enough. Authorities released the surveillance footage to the public, hoping that someone might recognize the man in the blue hoodie. One witness came forward to say that she had seen him running after Jill that night. Meanwhile, police received information back from Jill's bank and cell phone company, confirming that neither her credit card nor phone had been used since early Saturday morning. They also determined that her phone had been traveling on the Tullamarine Freeway near where she was last seen at around 4:30 in the morning when she vanished. They compared her whereabouts to data from Tom's phone and what they found changed the course of the entire investigation.
Oh, it
To
wasn't
the
Tom.
complete shock of the police, Tom's phone clearly showed that he was at their flat, just like he'd said.
Phone was.
Additionally, the forensic
Was
search
he?
yielded absolutely no incriminating evidence against him,
Oh,
so he was formally eliminated as a suspect.
all right.
But if Tom wasn't responsible for Jill's disappearance, who was?
well, that
as
guy in the
investigators
gray
studied
hoodie
the
was.
chilling surveillance footage further, they noticed that the man in the blue hoodie had actually passed by the bridal shop 4 minutes before Jill came into the frame. There were also several vehicles around that they thought could be related to her disappearance. Prompted by the widespread media attention this case garnered, multiple other women came forward on social media with harrowing stories of being approached or assaulted in the same area by someone who looked similar to the man in the blue hoodie. Then, with help from the public, police were finally able to confirm the man's identity. But what came after stunned the entire nation. Investigators identified the man caught on the surveillance tape as 41-year-old Adrian Ernest Bailey, a known criminal who just so happened to be out on parole at the time.
Of course he was.
Police raced to his home and questioned him, but he denied having ever seen Jill before or even being the man caught on camera. Still, they executed a search warrant on his home, and what they found blew the case wide open.
I bet you
Investigators discovered Jill's cell phone SIM card inside Adrian's house, and even more damning, they traced his cellular activity and found that he and Jill's phone had both passed through the same toll at the same time the night she vanished. The devices traveled a little over 30 miles away to Gisborne, but only Adrian's phone returned. When police confronted him with this information, Adrian claimed to have no explanation. Feeling the evidence stacking up against him, Adrian eventually crumbled and started to tell the truth about what really happened that night. He said he'd gotten into an argument with his girlfriend and went for a walk to clear his head, and that's when he noticed Jill walking down the street talking on her phone. He waited for her to end the call before approaching her, and from there, things quickly turned violent. Adrian told investigators that he followed Jill and tried to make advances toward her, but he became furious when she pulled away and slapped him. Then he dragged her into an alleyway and assaulted her as she screamed for help. Tragically, her cries went unheard, and Adrian strangled her to death. Later, he claimed, "You know, it really wasn't my intention to hurt her. All I thought was, what have I done?" While Adrian hasn't been formally diagnosed with any mental illness that we know of, he doesn't appear to take responsibility for his actions, which is common among psychopaths and sociopaths.
Just
By
because.
claiming it wasn't
Or
my
he's just a
intention,
fucking
he's trying to
dick.
shift the blame from himself and onto Jill. It's an attempt to rationalize his behavior. Adrian fled the
Doesn't
scene but
necessarily
returned
mean
shortly
he has
after with his
anything
car and a
wrong with
shovel,
him.
as seen on surveillance footage. He put Jill's body in his vehicle and drove to Gisborne to bury her in a shallow grave. Later that morning, he visited a service station and was again captured on CCTV. It's unclear whether or not he returned to place her purse on the street, but investigators believe he did just that sometime after Sunday's search. Adrian's behavior appears to be erratic and impulsive, which is also common among sociopaths. It was quite reckless to confront and assault Jill in public, where there could be witnesses or security cameras. Finally, Adrian outright said to the police, "I'm going to jail for a long time. I hope they bring back the death penalty before I get sentenced. I have no life left." Following the horrific confession, Adrian led investigators to Jill's body, and an autopsy later confirmed that she had compression fractures in her neck consistent with strangulation. 6 days after Jill went missing, Adrian was arrested and charged with her assault and murder. Meanwhile, outside the jailhouse, the public was outraged by the heinous crime, not just because it took place in what should have been a safe area, but also because it exposed major cracks in the justice system. Adrian had been committing violent acts against women since his teenage years, but was continuously let out of prison early. Before Jill's death, Adrian was released on parole and viciously attacked a man, breaking his jaw and rendering him unconscious. He was given a 3-month prison sentence but managed to find a loophole in the system by appealing the ruling. Therefore, his parole wasn't revoked, leaving him free to roam the streets and murder Jill on her walk home. During his confession, Adrian even stated to the police, "How many chances does a person need? They should never have let me out." Some reports state that Adrian initially planned to fight the charges against him, but he ultimately entered a guilty plea on April 5, 2013. However, he maintained his innocence in several other assaults that came to light amidst the media attention surrounding Jill's case. Nevertheless, Adrian was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum sentence of 35 years. While he attempted to fight the ruling by rejecting the judge's comment that he had taken perverted pleasure in the crime, the appeal was dismissed in less than 10 minutes. Justice continued to be served in the years that followed, with Adrian being found guilty of 3 other crimes against women that took place before Joe's murder. As a result, he was given an additional 18 years behind bars, and his minimum sentence was increased to 43 years, later appealed down to 40. Regardless, he won't be eligible for parole until he's 83 years old. Adrian's mother later told reporters that she had warned authorities about her son's violent behavior several times before Jill's murder. It's possible that Adrian's mother had received some public shaming over the actions of her son, so she wanted it to be known that she did try to alert authorities about Adrian's violent tendencies. During his victim impact statement, Tom Marr, who was once the prime suspect in his wife's murder, stated, "I think of the waste of a brilliant mind and a beautiful soul at the hands of a grotesque human being. I am half a person because of this crime."
Poor guy. You know, it's nice to see that it's not just America's justice system that is broken. Like when the criminal says, how many chances does somebody get? I mean, really. Like, how many times do you hear, and they were on parole or they were on probation? Like, I get that there's not enough room in the prisons for some people. I get it. I get it. But Jesus, like, so many violent offenders just reoffend. And then some don't. But that's what we spend all this money on and this research and these studies. And by now, with everything that everybody studies and everybody does, shouldn't you know by now who does what? These criminal profilers and all of these things, shouldn't you know by now who does what and who will do what and who will reoffend? Like, Jesus Christ. Like, what are we doing? Like, what is the point? You're sitting there talking about you want to put everybody in a fucking category and you want to do all of this and do all of that. And you can by somebody's traits, and you can study serial killers, and you can study people, and if they're a psychopath, you know that they're going to do these things and predict behavior, but you fucking can't. Cuz if you could, you wouldn't let these people out, or you would make a law that would keep them fucking locked up. And you wouldn't have to sit there and say, "Oh, well, they were on parole." They wouldn't have a fucking chance to be on parole. People like Daryl Brooks wouldn't have a chance to be on fucking parole and then drive through a fucking parade and kill 6 dancing grannies and run over 60 other people. But he was on probation. But you spend all this time and all of these studies and reform, and rehabilitation so people don't reoffend. It's crazy. It irritates me. It irritates me that the system is so fucking broken that and so sideways. They let people out that shouldn't be out, and they keep people in that shouldn't be kept in. It's fucking backwards and so just I I don't even know. Like, you don't even know where to begin. Like, there's people in there that shouldn't be, and then there's people in there that should be in there for the rest of their life. And then you give everybody, and everything needed to be done, by the book, but things weren't done by the book. And everything was so corrupt at one point, and then, how do you know people are in there on on a good charge, or they were put in there for legit reasons? Like, how do you know? Like, how do you know they wasn't a dirty prosecutor that put them in there because they wanted to, or because they could, and they had a shit defense? Like, how do you know? Like, how do you know any of these things? And then how do you know that they didn't get 200 years for something they should have got 5 for? Like, how do you know? Because they had shit representation, and then nobody to help them. Or you got somebody that should have never gotten out in the first place, but because they had a shit ton of money, they could get out. They bought their freedom. It's fucked up, man. All of it's fucked up. Anyway, that's that. That's all I got for you. Oh, if I did not say it at the beginning, I know I didn't say it at the beginning because I was too busy talking about falling down the stairs and being sick and all the moving and things. Like, comment, and subscribe. I need all of those things. I need you to do all of those things. Like, comment, subscribe, share it. Get my name out there, get my comment, or get my comments out there. Yeah, get that out there too. Get my content out there. Do all of that. I should, get back into the groove of things here within the next few days, and get back into, oh my god, yeah, right. All right. Well, that is that. Thanks for watching. And if you have anything that you would like to see, or you would like me to comment on anything that you're interested in seeing, or, what have you, put it in the comments below. Let me know. And I would love to. Um, but yeah, let me know what you think about anything. And I do try to respond, since I have such a busy comment section. I try to respond to everybody. So, like, comment, subscribe, and I shall see you on the next one. Deuces.